The Cotton Patch Parables of Liberation, good choice. These are special because of this guy, Clarence Jordan. He grew up in the U.S. South in Georgia in the 30s, and he was a white guy. He hated the racism that he saw around himself. He hated the poverty and the economic injustice. And so he decided to go to school to learn farming techniques so he could pass those on to sharecroppers so they could increase their yield and have more money. But as he was at school, he realized that there's also a spiritual problem underlying this. And so he decided to go to seminary and also become a minister. And not only a minister, but a student of the Greek and the original languages that the New Testament was published in. And so before this, he started a community called koinonia, which is the Greek word for fellowship. And it was an integrated community. So in the U.S. South, in the 50s, he had black people and white people living on a communal farm, working together, sharing resources. And as you can imagine, the pushback was immense. This was when the Klan was very much into dynamiting anybody it didn't like. So not only were they facing violence, they were also facing an economic boycott. They wouldn't get sold farm equipment, lime, things you need to just run a farm. The same thing that was happening to poor black sharecroppers oftentimes as well during these times. And so it was a long time and a lot of hardship for the first 10 years or so of that koinonia project. But as the 60s went on, it eventually started to get a little bit better, and then he started coming up with these cotton patch parables of liberations. So it is the parables of Jesus in a modern, homey retelling, like in the U.S. South, usually dealing with race. And what Clarence Jordan would keep talking about is these parables of Jesus are hand grenades. He would come to town and tell these stories, which is really pulling the pin, tossing it over his shoulder, and walking out of town. And if you really dug into what these meant, they were so explosive to the current social order of the time. And the thing that Clarence Jordan got, the same thing that David Bentley Hart got, the guy who did the new translation of the New Testament, like the word-for-word translation, he said what surprised him the most was how much Jesus detested money. Not like, oh, you shouldn't get too into it. It's like he hated it. He hated the idea of it. Everything about it was awful to him and emblematic of the failings of the age. And so Clarence Jordan inherited that. He hated money as well. And he brought that out of Jesus' teaching. So I'm going to do one of the classic parables from this. And even if you're not a Christian, I think the explosiveness of these stories is important for all of us to know, because the modern Jesus being worshipped in most churches is not at all the person you get from these parables. And I think it's worth for any of us to know him. So, on to the story. So this is a classic from Matthew 13 about the farmer spreading his seed on different types of soil, and different types of things happen to it. Now, Matthew unravels this parable for us as follows. Everyone who hears the idea of the revolution and does not catch on, the evil one comes and snatches away what has been planted in his heart. This is the wayside seed, and the seed planted on the rocky, shallow soil refers to the one who, when he hears the idea, right away he gets all hepped up about it. But he does not have any root within himself because he's wishy-washy. He soon gets tripped up. Now the seed which fell among the weeds was received by one who hears the idea, and the cares of this age and the deceitfulness of wealth choke out the ideas, and it becomes fruitless. But the one who is the deep earth, this is the one who hears the idea and who understands it, and who brings forth abundant fruit. This is the parable of responses. The same idea, the same seed was planted in each instance, but the results were different. Sometimes you preach to people and give them the word. This means capitalized, the hand up. You read it to them from the Greek and the English, Phillips, King James, Revised Standard, and New English Bibles, and they don't get it. It just goes in one ear and out the other. Nothing in between to stop it. The people come in, they listen to the sermon, and as the preacher stands at the door, they shake his hand and tell him what a fine sermon it was that they slept through, and that's the end of it. They're going about their business. It just never makes any contact. It never fires up anything. They're just there. Then there are all those people who listen. You've got a crusade for Christ, and you've got all people listening and singing and getting all hepped up, and everybody comes down and makes a profession of faith in Christ. Oh, ain't it wonderful? But then, when the sailing gets rough and when the persecution arises because of the word, well, nobody makes it clear we were going to get persecuted. They just told us we were going to get a free ticket to heaven. What do you mean getting persecuted? That wasn't part of the contract. These are the shallow people. And then there are those people who represent the good dirt. But they are preoccupied with other things. They're fine people. They're good-hearted people. They mean well. But they're just cut off from ever realizing their potential by the rat race, or whatever kind of race people are putting on now. The cares of the world, the distractions of the age, and the deceitfulness of riches. Perhaps the most deceitful of all things is riches. These things just choke them out and prevent them from ever maturing. Now, it seems to me that this really classifies modern-day Christianity more than anything else. By and large, I think Christians are good people. They're nice, middle-class, suburban people. They're well-educated. They mean well. They don't hate Jesus. In fact, they love him, if he'll stay in his place. And they don't mean him any harm. It's just that they are so busy. They've got to go here, they've got to go there. They're busy with their houses, they're busy with their automobiles, they're busy with their business. They just don't have time to think, and they don't have time to get on the ball. So they're choked out. But there are those who do bring forth fruit, some 100-fold, some 60, and some 30.